Good morning, folks. Today, the Pope's visit to D.C., I feel quite surreal. I'm extremely sorry to bring up a much more serious issue, the topic of North Korea. Before we move on to this serious topic, I would like to share a conversation I've made with an Ethiopian friend 5 years ago. An Ethiopian friend bragged about his expertise in Korean affairs, how much well-versed with Korean politics and all the economic and social issues he was aware about. We met about 6 months, and then I heard a very shocking question from him, and he asked, well, I know a lot about Korea. I know your country is divided. I know your country had a war. Now, Ju-hyung, I gotta make a very straightforward question to you. Are you from East Korea or West Korea? So I said, well, maybe you're referring to Germany, but our country is divided south and north. And the topic that I'm gonna pour here is gonna be about the northern part of the Korean peninsula. And of course, me and Sang-yong and Zandi are from the southern part of the Korean peninsula. And there's a little joking in the United Nations that the South Korean is a little wealthier version of North Korea, but we are obviously a different country. So I'd like to just clear the definition of the Koreas, the two Koreas. And my kind of question would be, there's lots of speculations about the lifespan of the North Korean regime, but will it collapse in the foreseeable future or not? But my conclusion is no, and I'm going to give you 3 grounds for my argument. And before that, why I talk about North Korea? It's a very small country, relatively speaking. It's located in the far eastern part of the globe. But we Koreans are fully aware with the ramification of the unification. We'll be the ones who are going to embrace the impact by ourselves. And Chinese will be aware. The refugee problems, if the regime collapses, the refugees you have to embrace. It will be a socially extremely burden. Some impact even could be numbered at thousands. Stravlov last week mentioned that, wouldn't it be a small impact because Chinese already have 1.5 or huger population, so 1 million refugees won't have an impact, but it will be a huge impact to Chinese. And of course, the economic impact of the North Korean regime's collapse would obviously impact Greece as well as Ahmed, you're from Egypt. Yeah. Yes, we actually, our South Korean government and our construction team have helped in expanding your American University in Cairo. So if North Korea collapses, all these would be negatively impacted. So now, but my argument, 3 grounds that the North Korean regime will not collapse in the foreseeable future is first, economical reason. Now, back in 2008, there was a global financial economic crisis, and almost all of the countries were negatively impacted. But paradoxically, North Korea have shown an extreme a process of recovery. I can tell it by some economic data, for instance, industrial production and export and import volume, starting from 2012. So I have seen that there is an adaptation from the North Korean economy pretty decoupled from the global economic crisis. So I can see that they are adapting to their own mode of economic survival, unlike the old speculations that North Korean economy does not exist or have been already collapsed. So they are still well functioning. And politically, secondly, the 31-year-old Kim Jong-un lacks the credentials of his father, or obviously his grandfather, and many said definitely that he won't last for about 2 or 3 years, but he's now well he's maintaining his throne in the North Korean regime. And I think contrast to the last year's Sony Picture interview movie that depicted Kim Jong-un as a psychological wimp, I think he's psychologically capable to run that country and has survived 4 assassination attempts. So I think politically there's no obvious candidate at this point in the horizon, so I think politically he is pretty stable. And lastly, international factor. Currently, the G2 countries, China and US, is on a mode of cooperation, economic cooperation, because they have to maintain and manage the global economy in the recovery phase. They won't obviously want the status quo to be reshuffled into a negative bad spiral. So the two countries are now closely coordinating. They won't won't, and they will prevent anything happening from the Far Eastern Economic Bloc, and that's one of the reasons. And I think China and U.S. is like more like coordinating in order to like constrain Japan's more expanding power. And the negative element of North Korean would be unmanageable both to China and U.S. So internationally speaking, no superpower actually now can manage and want these uneventful things happening in this region. And most of all, our South Korean government and the constituencies do not want a provocative event happening on our soil, because whenever in North Korea make a provocative activities, we Koreans want retaliation, but always, whatever the polls and results we see in a survey, we want measured response, not a provocation or extended shooting war. So considering all these economic, political, and international factors, I think, my personal opinion says that it is unlikely to see an imminent North Korean regime's collapse. Well, there's an exception. There's always a outlier, like the disintegration of the Soviet Union back in 1991 and the fall of the Berlin Wall. That events can occur. Yes, I cannot erase all those possibilities, but like more than 90% with my own calculation, personal assessment, says that we have a higher chance for the North Korean regime to survive for the foreseeable future. I think that's my conclusion, and I may have questions if you are curious. Yeah.
China also had a very fast economic growth during the financial crisis, by the way. And I want to ask, you just mentioned the future, you think about the future of the Kim Jong-un regime, right? What do you think about the future of the Korea Peninsula, such as reunion of South Korea and North Korea?
Okay. Well, to the first point that you mentioned, I was saying about relative, economic growth. China maintained more than 9.0 quarterly growth of GDP, but after 2008, it had lowered to 8 point something, and now 7 point something. So there was a relative impact.
Yeah.
Still was a high growth compared to other countries. And to the second question, obviously North Korea want their mode of unification, which is using military might, and South Koreans wants a peaceful unification. So it doesn't stand a chance for us to have a combined version of unification. But in a longer time frame, we South Koreans are expecting a peaceful mode, like economic integration first and then political integration, like two-track policy we're conceiving. But I cannot give you a definite answer because we're not negotiating. We're mingling with a wall, but we are interacting with a living regime. So they may adapt to our policies, and they may deceive us and exploit our strategies. So it's just two-way and two-track policy. So the final version of the unification, if it occurs in some point in the future, it might be quite different from what I think right now. So, but I hope that there might be a peaceful one that would not could constrain the negative impact to both North Korean and South Korean people. That's my hope and my desire. Yeah.
At the end, you mentioned that you implicated that the North Korea may have internal conflicts that may cause it to collapse, just like Soviet Union.
Yeah.
But it seems that you just refuse, you don't accept this opinion. So I'm interested in what makes you believe this will not happen in the near future.
So you're bringing out internal conflict. If you see the past 50 years and 60 years, the political history of North Korea, there was always candidates who may exploit the weakened regime and can be the next ruler, but at that point there were kind of power disparity between the candidates. So there were obviously the second candidate, third candidate, like the generals who are taking control of the DMZ, which would be more powerful compared to the other region. So, but now, the 2 years ago, Kim Jong-un executed his own uncle. So there are no obvious second near peer candidate at this point. So candidates exist, but they are like balance of power. So there's a huge gap between Kim Jong-un and the other candidates. So I think if your scenarios need to materialize, I think the candidate's power should, be upgraded to a certain point. But right now, I call that as an absent. It doesn't mean that candidates are not there, but they are pretty weak compared to the Kim Jong-un. So that's the reason why the gap. That's the ground that I'm saying that the internal civil war type of implosion is pretty unlikely at this point.
How about the revolution from bottom? General people, can have.
Yes, actually, there were several occasions, especially in the 1990s, when extreme famine and drought was like waving through the North Korean economy. So they had to, release all these economic policies. They had to loosen their economic control. But nowadays, as I mentioned, like North Korea is doing some unconventional things like opening up the black market, the private barter economy, just breathing room for the grassroots to survive for themselves. So they're condoning those black market economies. So I think there's a kind of a striking a balance between the grassroots and the North Korean government. So I think if there's no further squeezing from the outer side, like economic sanctions, or like North Korea regime going just back to squeezing all the internal economy and squeezing all the black economy, then the grassroots may have a revolt because their livelihood would be to be non-existent. But currently, North Korea regime is allowing them to grow their own stuffs and sell and barter into their own private economy. So I think revolt is unlikely. Sorry, after the class.
Thank you.